A young boy vanished from his neighborhood, leaving behind only memories and unanswered questions. Until years later, a buried box of old photos ignites a father's desperate quest to uncover the truth and bring his son home. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden streaks across the quiet suburban street. It was the kind of warm Saturday afternoon where the air felt lazy and the world seemed perfectly still. Children's laughter drifted between fences, bikes skidded across driveways, and sprinkler systems clicked to life in well-trimmed lawns. In the middle of this peaceful scene, 7-year-old Liam Carson stood barefoot on the edge of the porch, his helmet crooked on his head, his little blue bike wobbling beside him. "Dad, I'm going to ride around the block," he shouted, already hopping onto the pedals. His father, Daniel, glanced up from the porch swing where he was sipping coffee and sorting through bills. He gave a distracted smile and waved. "Okay, buddy. Be back by 5. Your mom's making spaghetti." Liam grinned, kicked off the ground, and disappeared down the driveway. That was the last time Daniel Carson would ever see his son as he knew him. The hours that followed blurred into chaos. When 5 o'clock came and went with no sign of Liam, Daniel's unease began to coil in his gut. By 5:30, he had walked the neighborhood twice, calling his son's name in rising tones. By 6, his voice was hoarse, and panic had set in like a poison in his chest. He called the police. By 7, flashing red and blue lights bathed the cul-de-sac, and concerned neighbors stood in clusters on their lawns, murmuring and clutching their children close. By 8, helicopters were overhead. Dogs were brought in. Volunteers fanned out into the surrounding woods with flashlights and megaphones. Every garage, every shed, every crawl space was checked. But there was nothing, no screams, no struggle, no footprints in the mud. Just Liam's bike lying on its side, near the rusted fence that separated the neighborhood from a small stretch of dense trees. The front tires still spun in lazy circles, as if he'd just let go. Daniel refused to believe it. This wasn't how stories were supposed to go. In stories, the kid always turned up in a neighbor's basement watching cartoons or asleep in a treehouse. But not Liam. Not his little boy with the curious eyes and the sketchbook full of superheroes. As the night deepened and hope began to die in the eyes of the search teams, Daniel stood by the fence where the bike had been found. He stared into the woods, heart thudding like a war drum, willing the darkness to give his son back. But it gave nothing. No clues, no sign, just silence. The following morning brought news crews and headlines. Boy vanishes from quiet suburban street. The neighborhood became a stage for interviews and speculation. People spoke in hushed tones and pointed fingers. Some blamed strangers, others suggested wild animals. A few whispered about old rumors, that those woods had always been strange. None of it mattered to Daniel. All he cared about was finding Liam. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He replayed every moment. Had Liam said anything strange? Had he seen anyone watching their house? Could someone have followed him? Every second of that day became a puzzle piece he couldn't force to fit. That night, Daniel sat alone in Liam's room. The blanket was still tossed from the morning, and his favorite stuffed bear lay upside down on the floor. A drawing sat half-finished on the desk. A rocket ship with Liam and Daniel waving from the windows. Daniel ran a trembling finger over the crayon lines. He let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob and not quite a scream, just a raw, hollow ache escaping from somewhere deep inside. He made a promise then, aloud, to the empty room. "I'm going to find you, Liam, no matter how long it takes. I swear to you." And so began the years of waiting, of searching, of holding onto a memory that refused to fade. The day Liam vanished would forever mark the end of Daniel's ordinary life, and the beginning of a mystery that would haunt the neighborhood for years to come. 3 years had passed, and yet for Daniel Carson, time had all but stopped. The world outside continued to spin. Seasons changed, leaves fell, snow came and went, neighbors moved in and out. But inside his modest 2-story house, everything remained frozen in that terrible moment. Liam's room was untouched. His drawings still clung to the walls, curling at the edges. His small shoes remained lined up by the door. The bed was still made with a blanket that smelled faintly of baby shampoo and sleep. Daniel couldn't bring himself to move anything. As if changing the room might erase the last trace of his son. Grief had wrapped itself around him like a vice, but he refused to let it crush him entirely. He functioned barely. He got up, he worked, switching from his marketing job to part-time freelance gigs so he could stay close to home, and he made dinner for one. His marriage hadn't survived. Melissa had moved out 2 years ago, unable to bear the constant weight of absence that hung in the house like smoke. She said she needed a fresh start, that Liam would want them to keep living. Daniel had nodded, but deep down he couldn't let go. Something inside him still whispered that Liam wasn't gone. Not really, just lost, hidden. Despite the official search being long since called off, Daniel never stopped looking. He had joined online forums for missing children, scanned police reports from neighboring counties, and even hired 2 private investigators. One of them had drained Daniel's savings with empty promises and vague leads. The other quit after 6 months, telling Daniel, "Sometimes people vanish, and there just aren't answers." But Daniel never accepted that. He developed rituals, daily walks along the edge of the woods, scouring for anything out of place, checking the security cameras he'd installed around the house, visiting pawn shops in the hopes that maybe Liam's backpack or watch might turn up somewhere. It was an obsession, a quiet, relentless one. Neighbors had stopped asking how he was doing. At first, they brought casseroles and sympathy. Now they just gave nods of recognition, the kind reserved for someone marked by tragedy. Children who once played with Liam had grown older, moved on. Their laughter in the distance felt like echoes from a world Daniel could no longer reach. One cold October morning, Daniel stood in front of the rusted chain-link fence where Liam's bike had been found. The trees beyond had turned shades of amber and crimson. Wind rustled through the leaves like whispers. He leaned against the post, hands buried in his coat pockets, staring into the woods with the same intensity he had on the night Liam vanished. He came here often. He didn't know why. Maybe to feel closer to Liam, or maybe because something inside him believed the answer was still here, buried beneath years of silence. As the wind picked up and branches swayed, Daniel noticed something odd, a faint humming sound, soft and low, like metal vibrating in the distance. It lasted only a second, then gone. He looked around. Nothing. No cars. No power tools. Just the sighing of trees. But the sound stayed with him, like a thread tugging gently at his thoughts. That night, Daniel had the dream again, the one he'd had off and on for years. He was walking through the woods. Everything was quiet except for the crunch of leaves underfoot. Then he saw Liam, standing in a clearing, older than when he vanished, maybe 10 or 11 now, wearing the same shirt he wore that day, but faded. Liam looked straight at him, raised a hand, and pointed towards something behind Daniel. But every time Daniel turned, he woke up before seeing what it was. He sat upright in bed, drenched in sweat, heart racing. There was a strange certainty pulsing in his chest. Not fear, not grief, but something else. A signal, maybe a message. He didn't know why, but he felt it deep in his bones. Something had shifted. Liam's disappearance was no longer just a wound. It was a mystery calling to be solved, and the woods were still hiding something. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. Daniel lay on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, laptop open on his chest, though he hadn't typed anything in hours. His eyes were half closed, drifting between wakefulness and uneasy sleep, still haunted by the dream of Liam pointing into the shadows. A storm was beginning to stir outside, wind tapping against the windows like insistent fingers. Leaves blew across the driveway in swirls, and a low rumble of thunder echoed from the distant hills. Just past midnight, Daniel woke suddenly to a sharp, clattering noise. It wasn't the storm. This was something else, a sound with weight and purpose like metal against stone. He sat upright, heart immediately on edge. He listened. Nothing. Then, there was again a distinct, hollow clank echoing faintly from outside. Not from the front yard, not the street. It was coming from the backyard. Daniel pulled on his coat and grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer. He didn't even stop to put on shoes. He stepped out into the chilly night, the door creaking closed behind him. The yard was wet with the first signs of rain, but the noise had stopped. He swept the beam of light across the fence, the trees, the old garden shed. Nothing. The wind had picked up, rattling the loose gutter and sending branches scraping along the house's siding. Still, Daniel stood there, scanning. And then, another noise. A softer one this time. A scraping, like something being dragged. His breath caught. The light fell in the far corner of the yard, just past the stone path and near the patch of earth where nothing had grown for years. A square of ground Daniel had long since stopped tending, its soil hard and cracked. That's when he noticed it. The earth had shifted. There was a slight dip in the middle, and the edges looked disturbed, as if something had been recently dug up or buried. Daniel moved closer, flashlight trembling in his grip. The soil looked darker there, damp even though the rain had barely touched it. He crouched down and reached out, his fingers grazing the dirt. It was soft, freshly turned. He didn't know why, but something compelled him to dig. Not with a shovel, not with tools, but with his bare hands. He began clawing at the earth, scooping away handfuls of cold, wet soil. His mind raced. It could have been an animal. Maybe a raccoon or a stray dog had dug here. But something didn't feel right. Something felt guided. After 10 minutes, his fingers hit something hard. Wood. He froze. His heart pounded in his ears. He cleared more dirt, revealing a small wooden box, no larger than a shoebox, stained and weathered. It had no lock, just a simple latch covered in rust. Daniel hesitated, fingers hovering over the lid. 1,000 thoughts rushed through his head. Why was it buried here? Who put it there? Could it be no? It couldn't. He unlatched the box and slowly lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, stacked neatly, dry despite the damp earth. They looked old, yellowed at the edges, curled slightly, and they weren't just random family pictures. They were of Liam, not the ones Daniel had seen before. These were different. In some, Liam looked older, standing in unfamiliar places. In others, he was holding things Daniel had never seen. A toy wooden airplane, a blue backpack with a symbol he didn't recognize. And in every photo, Liam looked directly at the camera. Daniel's breath caught. These weren't old memories. These were recent. His hands trembled as he pulled out the photos one by one, scanning for clues. Some had dates scribbled in the corner, dates after Liam disappeared. He clutched the box to his chest, stepping back from the hole in the ground, eyes wide with disbelief. Someone had been watching Liam. Someone had kept him alive. And now, for the first time in years, Daniel had proof. He looked out across the yard, to the dark line of trees just beyond the fence, and whispered, "Liam, where are you?" Daniel sat at the kitchen table, the wooden box open before him, every photo laid out in a careful grid across the surface. His hands trembled as he moved from one image to the next, each photograph pulling him deeper into a state of disbelief, awe, and dread. The fluorescent kitchen light buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on Liam's face in every photo. Not the toddler face Daniel remembered, but a boy's face, older, more mature, as if time had gone on for Liam somewhere else. He examined the details in each photo like a detective combing through evidence. One picture showed Liam standing in a forest clearing, holding a pine cone, his hair slightly longer, his expression calm. Almost too calm. Another showed him sitting on a wooden step outside what looked like a cabin, staring directly at the camera. The trees behind him were thick and dark, unfamiliar. But what struck Daniel most wasn't just that the photos were new. It was that in every single one, Liam was alone. No adults. No other children. No hint of who had taken the pictures. Daniel picked up a photo with a date in the corner. July 14th, 2022. That was over a year after Liam vanished. He clutched it tightly, the edges curling beneath his grip. The implications spun in his head. If these photos were real, and they certainly looked real, then Liam had been alive long after the world had given up on him. Someone had been with him, watching him, keeping him hidden. But why? Daniel's first thought was to call the police. But then he stopped. What would he say? That he found a buried box of photos in his own backyard of his son, missing for years? They'd think he was imagining things, or worse, that he'd planted the evidence himself. He needed to be sure. He needed answers before he involved anyone else. He retrieved a magnifying glass from the junk drawer and leaned in closer to the photos. One in particular drew his attention. Liam was sitting at a wooden table, scribbling in a notebook. His eyes were focused, his mouth slightly open in concentration. On the wall behind him was a strange emblem, a hand-carved wooden sun with arrows radiating from its center. Daniel didn't recognize the symbol, but it looked intentional, like it meant something. Like a clue. As he continued studying the images, he noticed a pattern. Some photos showed Liam wearing the same shirt or sitting in the same spot. But the lighting was different. The seasons changed, which meant someone had taken multiple photos of him in the same location across many months. Daniel grabbed a pad and began organizing them chronologically using the dates written in the corners. Spring, summer, fall, even winter. There were over 30 photos in total, and the last one was dated March 2023, less than a year ago. The last photo sent a chill down his spine. It showed Liam from behind, standing at the edge of what looked like a wooden bridge that led into a forest trail. In the corner of the photo, almost hidden in shadow, was a figure, blurry, out of focus, just tall enough to be an adult. Daniel squinted, heart racing. It was the only photo that featured someone else. But the figure's face was turned away, shrouded in darkness. Daniel's mind flooded with questions. Who was this person? Why were they with Liam? Were they the one keeping him away, protecting him, or imprisoning him? The storm outside deepened, lightning flashing through the window, illuminating the kitchen in stark white. Daniel sat motionless, the photo clutched in his hand, his pulse pounding like a drum. For the first time in 3 years, he had something real. A lead. Evidence. Proof. And in that moment, a fire lit inside him. The same fire that had almost gone out after all these years. Liam was out there, and whoever had taken those pictures had left behind a trail. Daniel didn't know who buried the box, or why they'd buried it in his own backyard. But it meant one thing. Someone wanted him to find it. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The storm had passed, but a different kind of storm now stirred inside him. One of urgency, confusion, and raw determination. By dawn, the kitchen table was covered with notes, sketches, and lists. Every photo from the box had been analyzed and reanalyzed, each detail magnified in his mind like puzzle pieces demanding to be connected. He stared at the final photo again, the one with Liam standing on a wooden bridge leading into a forest and the shadowy figure in the corner. That image haunted him the most. He enlarged it digitally using his old laptop, tweaking contrast and exposure, trying to bring out more details of the figure in the background. But no matter what he did, the person remained an outline, just out of reach, faceless, anonymous. Still, he focused on what he could see. The bridge, the trees, the landscape. That wasn't just any trail. The foliage looked familiar, not like a national park or remote wilderness, but more like the edge of a neighborhood greenbelt. The curved wooden railing of the bridge reminded him of something. A hiking path on the outskirts of town that led toward the woods past North Harlan Creek. Heart racing, he grabbed a pen and circled a spot on an old map he had spread across the table. Harlan Creek Trailhead. The place had always felt too close, too ordinary to be meaningful. But now it pulsed on a map like a beacon. He left the house just after sunrise, a thermos of coffee in hand, and drove toward the northern edge of the town. Mist still clung to the streets, and the neighborhood looked sleepy and still, unaware of the revelation that had cracked open his world the night before. He parked at the trail entrance, which he hadn't visited in years, not since Liam had gone missing. It had been part of the early search grid, but they hadn't found anything. No footprints, no clothing, no clues. Just more trees and endless quiet. As he stepped onto the trail, Daniel's breath fogged in the morning chill. His boots crunched over fallen leaves, and birds chirped somewhere overhead, oblivious to the weight he carried. He held a printout of the photo, scanning the trees, the slope of the path, the angles of the terrain. After about 20 minutes, the trail curved, and there it was. The bridge. His breath caught. It was smaller than it looked in the picture, worn down over the years, with moss creeping over its railing and planks that creaked beneath his feet. But the shape, the bend, even the way the light filtered through the trees, it matched the photo exactly. Daniel walked to the same position where Liam had stood. He looked down at the forest floor below, then turned slowly, inspecting every inch of the area. His eyes searched for any markings, anything that could match what he'd seen in the photos. Then he saw it. A tree not far from the bridge bore a familiar symbol, carved into its bark, worn but still visible, a sun with arrows radiating from its center. The same symbol that had appeared in the photo behind Liam. It hadn't just been decoration. It was a marker. Daniel's heart thudded with renewed hope. He moved toward it, brushing his fingers across the carving. Below it, partially hidden beneath layers of moss, was a small rock formation, too deliberate to be random. He knelt, removed the stones, and uncovered a faded scrap of cloth. He held it to his nose. It smelled faintly of cedar smoke and dirt. His hand shook. He was standing where Liam had been. This was no longer theory or coincidence. Someone had brought his son here. Someone had left signs. Back at the bridge, Daniel stood motionless for a long time, listening. The forest whispered in quiet rustlings and far-off birdsong. He didn't know where the trail would lead next, but the path had been reopened. And this time, he wasn't just a grieving father. He was a man with clues, with fire, and with the beginning of a trail to follow. Somewhere out there, Liam had left pieces of his story behind, and Daniel was finally ready to find them. Daniel returned to the bridge every day for the next week, studying every angle of the surrounding woods, retracing the same path over and over like a man possessed. With each visit, he found new details, fresh scratches on the bark of certain trees, subtle piles of stones, a feather tied to a stick with twine, half-buried metal scraps that didn't belong in the wilderness. It felt like someone had been leaving breadcrumbs or had once lived here and wanted the forest to remember. But it wasn't until the sixth day that Daniel found something different. He had wandered further off the main path, through tangled underbrush that clawed at his jacket and caught his boots. The terrain shifted, the earth sloped upward, and through the thinning trees he saw it. A small, sagging structure tucked deep into the woods, mostly hidden behind a wall of ivy and decay. His breath caught in his throat. It was an old house, or what was left of one. The roof had partially collapsed, and the front steps were sunken into the ground. One window was broken, the frame hanging crookedly. The entire place looked forgotten by time, like it had been swallowed by the forest decades ago. Yet something about it stirred something deep in Daniel's chest. He approached carefully, heart pounding, each step slower than the last. The door creaked when he pushed it open, revealing a space cloaked in shadows and dust. Shafts of light pierced through holes in the ceiling, illuminating floating particles like glitter in the air. The floor creaked beneath his boots, but held. The smell of old wood, mildew, and something faintly sweet filled his nose. He stepped inside, calling out softly, "Hello." No answer, but the silence wasn't empty. It felt like something was watching. Inside, the house was stripped down to bones. No furniture except for a broken chair in the corner, a table missing two legs, and a shelf that had long ago collapsed under the weight of rot. But what grabbed his attention was on the far wall, a series of faded markings, childlike drawings in what looked like charcoal or ash. Suns, arrows, and stick figures. He stepped closer. One of the drawings was of a boy holding a dog's leash. Another showed a small figure walking along a line toward what looked like a cabin. And just beside it, scrawled almost like a signature, was a name. Liam. Daniel's knees weakened. He reached out, touching the wall with shaking fingers. The charcoal rubbed off slightly on his skin. It wasn't old, at least not ancient. This had been drawn years ago, maybe by Liam himself. A part of him still doubted. Could a boy so young survive in a place like this? Had he really lived here? Then, another discovery. In the corner near the fireplace was a rusted tin lunchbox. Daniel pried it, opened slowly. Inside were a few brittle crayons, a matchbox car, and a small, tattered notebook. He opened it carefully. Most of the pages were blank or smeared with age, but one still held words, written in a shaky, uneven scrawl. I heard the man again. Like she said. He said I was his now. I don't want to go back with him. I miss my dad. Daniel stared at the words, unable to breathe. She said, who was she? And he, the man Liam feared. Who was he? His grip on the notebook tightened. The forest had guarded its secrets for years, but now it was starting to give them up. This house had been a shelter. Perhaps not a safe one, but a place Liam had once known. Daniel's mind swirled with new questions. Someone had protected his son. Someone else had hunted him. And Liam had survived. Long enough to write, to draw, to remember. Daniel stepped outside the crumbling house, the wind brushing through the trees like whispers. The forest no longer felt lifeless. It felt alive with memory, pulsing with truths buried in its soil. And Daniel knew this wasn't the end of the trail. It was only the beginning. The walk back from the abandoned house felt heavier than the walk in. Daniel clutched the worn notebook in his hand like it was a lifeline, his thoughts tangled and turbulent. The weight of the words Liam had written still echoed inside him. She said to Hyde. He said I was his now. I miss my dad. It was the first real proof that Liam had been alive long after he vanished. It wasn't just speculation anymore. It was Liam's own voice, scrawled across the brittle paper in letters that trembled with fear and innocence. Back at home, Daniel laid the notebook on the kitchen table under a warm light and began turning each page with surgical care. Most of the notebook had degraded with time, but here and there were fragmented sentences, childlike drawings, and uneven writing. Some pages held crude pictures of trees, a small cabin, and stick figures. Others had single words, safe, watching, gone, don't trust. But one page, pressed tightly against the back cover, made his breath catch. It was barely legible, but the letters were etched deeper than the others, as if written with determination or even desperation. 3 words, over and over. Mira helps me. He whispered the name aloud. Mira. Who was Mira? Daniel ran his fingers over the page, trying to make sense of the message. The way Liam had repeated it, not once, but 4 times across the page, made it clear this wasn't just a passing reference. Mira had mattered. Mira had helped him, had protected him. Maybe she was the she Liam mentioned in the earlier entry. Maybe she had saved his life. He turned back to the earlier pages, searching again. He found another mention. Mira gave me food. Said don't talk. Hide when he comes. Wait till she says. The words were scattered and incomplete, but the meaning was unmistakable. Mira had been there. She had given Liam food. She had told him to hide. And someone had been a threat. Daniel's thoughts raced. If this Mira had once protected Liam, maybe she was still out there. Maybe she knew what had happened. Maybe she had seen the man Liam feared. Maybe she had the answers Daniel had been chasing for over a decade. He sprang from his chair and moved to his office, digging through the box of old police reports, maps, and files he had saved from the early days of the investigation. Somewhere in the mess of names and addresses, there had to be someone named Mira who lived near Harlan Creek or had once resided near those woods. It took nearly 2 hours, but at the bottom of a weathered folder labeled Unverified Sightings, Daniel found it. A brief report from a neighbor who had called in a tip during the 2nd week of the original search. The woman had reported a strange child sighting near her cabin at the forest's edge. The boy had looked scared, dirty, and ran off when she tried to speak to him. The woman's name was written in the margin, Mira Talbot. Daniel's pulse surged. He scanned the report. Mira had lived in a small off-grid home deep in the woods west of Harlan Creek. Authorities had visited her once, but she denied ever seeing a child, and no evidence was found. The tip had been marked as inconclusive and dropped shortly afterward. But now Daniel knew different. Mira hadn't just seen Liam. She had helped him. She had warned him to hide. She might have even hidden him herself. He quickly searched public records, only to find the house had since been foreclosed and Mira had disappeared from any official listings years ago. No forwarding address, no phone number, no known relatives. It was as if she had vanished, too. But Daniel couldn't let that stop him. He jotted down the old address, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. He would find her, even if she no longer lived there. Someone nearby might remember her. Someone in the woods might know the woman who once sheltered a lost boy. And for the first time since he had found the box in the garden, Daniel felt the trail growing warmer, the path ahead no longer fading into darkness. He whispered again as he started the car, "Mira, wherever you are, please still be out there," because she might be the only one left who knew the truth. The road to Mira Talbot's last known residence was little more than a winding dirt trail carved through thick pine and overgrown weeds. Daniel's tires kicked up dust and gravel as he drove deeper into the forest, past broken fences and rusted mailboxes swallowed by ivy. The afternoon light was fading fast, casting long, crooked shadows between the trees. With every passing mile, the air seemed to grow heavier, like the forest itself held its breath. Finally, he spotted it. The house, or what remained of it, stood just off the road, half hidden by a row of tilting birch trees. The small wooden cabin was sun-bleached and weathered, with warped siding and a roof patched with mismatched shingles. A cracked chimney jutted out like a broken tooth. The windows were dark, and a faded "No Trespassing" sign hung crookedly on the porch railing. Daniel parked and stepped out, his boots crunching on gravel. He approached slowly, scanning the surrounding area for any sign of life. But it was silent. No voices, no dogs barking, only the wind rustling the dry leaves overhead. He climbed the steps to the porch and knocked once out of habit, though he knew no one would answer. The door creaked open under his hand. Inside, the air was stale and tinged with the scent of old books and cedar. Dust floated in golden beams of sunlight that filtered through the cracked blinds. The living room was surprisingly tidy, though clearly abandoned. A small couch sat beneath a faded quilt, and shelves lined with paperback novels leaned against the wall. A few cups remained in the kitchen sink, and the refrigerator stood open, long emptied. Daniel moved carefully through the house, heart thudding in his chest. Every detail mattered. Every drawer, every corner might hold a piece of Liam's story. In a small back room, he found what appeared to be Myra's bedroom. A twin bed sat beneath a window, the blankets still folded neatly. On the dresser was a collection of trinkets, dried herbs tied in bundles, river stones, old postcards, and a hand-carved wooden box. Daniel opened the box gently. Inside were photographs, faded and curling with age. Some were landscapes, forests, lakes, old barns. Others were portraits, a woman with short, dark hair and kind, tired eyes. Mira. But one photo made Daniel freeze. It was a picture of a young boy standing in front of a treehouse. His face was smudged with dirt, but his eyes, those eyes, they were unmistakable. It was Liam, older than when he'd disappeared, but definitely him. The photo was dated in the corner, July 2014, nearly 2 years after Liam had vanished. Daniel gripped the edge of the dresser to steady himself. Liam had lived. He had been here. Mira had cared for him. She had protected him, hidden him from someone dangerous. And now there was proof. In the corner of the room sat a wooden chest. Daniel opened it slowly. Inside were notebooks, carefully stacked and labeled with dates. He flipped through one and saw daily notes, written in Myra's delicate script, descriptions of the weather, what she had cooked, observations about animals. And then, nestled among them, were entries that changed everything. Liam was quiet today. He had another nightmare. He asked when he could see his dad. I told him not yet. That man came again. I told Liam to hide. He listened. Daniel's heart ached as he read. These weren't the words of a stranger. They were the thoughts of someone who had risked everything for a lost boy. Mira had taken Liam in, cared for him, protected him from someone who had been hunting him, a man still unnamed. But Mira was gone now. There was no sign of where she had gone or what had happened to her. The trail was growing colder again, but the evidence she'd left behind was undeniable. Liam had survived. He had lived here, and someone had tried to take him again. Daniel knew what he had to do next. He packed the photo, the notebook, and a few other belongings into his bag. He had to find out who the man was, the one Liam feared, the one Mira had hidden him from. He had to trace the past further, through anyone who might have crossed paths with her. Because Mira had saved his son, and Daniel owed it to both of them to finish what she started. Daniel drove back to town under a sky streaked with gray, the sun dipping below the treetops as if hiding from the truth he'd just uncovered. The picture of Liam clutched in his coat pocket felt like a second heartbeat, and the notebook pages tucked in the seat beside him whispered secrets of a life his son had lived in silence, in hiding. But behind every memory Mira had recorded, one name was absent, and that absence was more terrifying than any mention. The man, the one Liam feared, the one Mira had worn to hide from. Who was he? Back home, Daniel spread the notebook entries across his desk and stared at Myra's careful handwriting. Several pages hinted at close calls, strange footprints near the cabin, loud knocks at night, Liam hiding beneath the floorboards. One entry, dated September 5th, 2014, stood out. He came back. Same truck, parked by the stream. I told Liam to run to the crawl space. I kept the lights off. He walked around the house. Didn't knock. Just watched. I could feel him breathing through the walls. Daniel shuddered. The detail was chilling. A man in a truck. Watching. Waiting. Not breaking in. Not speaking. Just watching. Daniel turned to his files again. Old police reports, tip lines, even vague statements from nearby residents during the early investigation. Many were chaotic, desperate calls from people who thought they'd seen a boy, heard crying, noticed a figure darting through the woods. But one file, nearly buried at the bottom, caught his eye. It was a call made by a retired forest ranger named Ellis Granger, placed 2 years after Liam disappeared. The man had reported a creepy guy who had been camping illegally near Harlan Creek. According to the ranger's statement, the man kept to himself, had a battered old pickup, and always packed up and left just before dawn. When questioned, he claimed he was just hiking, but Ellis noted something odd. The man never seemed to hike with gear, and once the ranger caught sight of him watching a nearby cabin through binoculars. That cabin, Daniel realized, matched Myra's location. Daniel's heart raced. He grabbed the printed photo from the file. It was grainy, taken from a trail cam, but it showed a tall figure in a heavy jacket and baseball cap, standing at the edge of the trees. His features were obscured by the grainy resolution, just a shadow of a man. But the timestamp placed him there in the same time frame as Myra's entries. Daniel called the station to ask about Ellis Granger. After a short hold, the deputy confirmed that Ellis had retired years ago, but he still lived in a small trailer park south of town. Without hesitating, Daniel grabbed his keys and drove into the evening mist. He found Ellis sitting on a lawn chair under a sagging canopy, sipping coffee and tossing breadcrumbs to a cluster of birds. The old man looked up as Daniel approached. "Help you?" Ellis asked, narrowing his eyes. Daniel introduced himself and explained he was Liam's father. The old ranger's expression changed immediately, sorrow softening his features. "I remember that case," Ellis said. "God, that boy was all over the news. Poor kid." Daniel handed him the trail cam photo. "Do you remember this man? You mentioned him in a report years ago." Ellis squinted at the image. "Yeah, I remember him clear as day. Never got his name. He gave me the creeps. I think he knew those woods better than I did. Always showed up near that old cabin where that lady used to live." "Mira, was it?" Daniel nodded. "Did he ever come back?" "Not that I saw, but you know what stuck with me?" Ellis leaned in. His truck, beat-up blue Chevy, rusted on the sides, had a weird sticker on the back window. Something foreign. Maybe a name. A name. Ellis tapped his temple. Something like Harvick or Harvin. Big letters. I remembered it because I'd never seen anything like it before. That was enough. A truck. A name. A habit of watching Myra's cabin. The pieces were falling into place. Someone had been stalking them. Someone had been trying to find Liam, or keep him hidden. Back in his car, Daniel wrote the name down and underlined it. He would find out who this man was. He'd trace the truck, the sticker, the shadow that had haunted Liam's life in silence. Because the man in the woods wasn't just watching. He had been waiting. The next morning, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, the scent of stale coffee drifting from the untouched mug in front of him. His eyes were glued to the name he'd scribbled in all caps on a scrap of paper the night before. Harvin. It echoed like a warning in his mind, looping through his thoughts with growing intensity. Who was Harvin? Was a name? A business? A location? Whatever it was, Daniel knew it was the key to finding the man who had stalked Myra's cabin, the man Liam feared. Daniel booted up his old laptop and began searching. He tried combinations: Harvin logo truck, Harvin Woods, Harvin local business. After several dead ends, one result caught his eye: Harvin Logistics, a small independent trucking company that used to operate in the region. According to a defunct business directory, the company had shut down 5 years ago after its owner was arrested on unrelated charges. But a name was listed at the bottom of the record: Calvin Harvin. Daniel's pulse quickened. Digging deeper, he found more. Calvin Harvin had once worked as a delivery driver for a local pharmacy, but after being let go for erratic behavior, he disappeared from public records. A mugshot accompanied an article from 2011. A gaunt man with deep-set eyes, stringy dark hair, and a long, thin scar that cut across his cheek. The article mentioned he'd been charged with trespassing on private property, a cabin in the woods, but the charges had been dropped when the homeowner declined to testify. Daniel's stomach twisted. It had to be Myra. She hadn't pressed charges. Maybe she had been too afraid. He leaned back in his chair, letting the pieces settle. Harvin had a history of lurking. He'd trespassed before. He'd been seen watching the cabin from the trees. And then, after the business folded and he was arrested, he had seemingly vanished. Daniel picked up his phone and called Detective Grayson. He hadn't spoken to him in years, not since Liam's case went cold, but he needed help, someone who still had access to deeper files. Grayson answered with a groggy voice. "Daniel, it's been a long time. I think I found something," Daniel said without preamble. "The man who was stalking Myra's cabin. I think it was Calvin Harvin." There was a pause on the line. "That name rings a bell," Grayson muttered. "Let me pull something up." As the detective typed, Daniel paced the kitchen. "Okay, I've got a file," Grayson said. "Harvin's name came up a few times over the years, small-time offenses mostly, but there's something odd. Around 2015, he became a person of interest in a missing child case up north. The case was never solved, but the report said he was seen several times near the property. Nothing stuck, though. He vanished before they could question him." Daniel stopped pacing. "So he's done this before." "Looks like it. But get this, I'm seeing an old residential address for him. A hunting cabin near the edge of Black Hollow Forest. It's been abandoned for years." "Send me the location," Daniel said without hesitation. "Case in sight." "Daniel, you shouldn't go out there alone. If this guy's still around." "I'm not waiting anymore," Daniel said, voice firm. "He took my son from his life, from his home, from me. If he's still out there, I'm going to find him." Grayson relented and texted the coordinates. Daniel grabbed his gear, packed the notebook and the photo of Liam, and headed for the door. The air outside was crisp, the morning sun just rising, casting long shadows on the dew-drenched lawn. The deeper Daniel got into this, the clearer one thing became. Liam hadn't just vanished. He'd been hidden, protected, and then stalked. And now, the trail led straight to the last place Harvin had called home. He had no idea what he'd find there, but he knew one thing. The truth was waiting in those woods, and he wasn't leaving without it. Daniel's truck rumbled along the narrow dirt road, winding through Black Hollow Forest. The sun filtered through the dense canopy, casting mottled shadows on the ground. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with every mile, heart pounding in sync with the crunch of tires on gravel. The address Detective Grayson had sent led him here, to an old hunting cabin, secluded and half-swallowed by towering pines. He parked beside a rusted metal gate, its hinges squeaking in the breeze as he pushed it open. The air smelled damp, earthy, untouched by time, but heavy with silence. The cabin stood a short walk away, its weathered wooden boards gray and cracked, windows clouded with years of grime. The faded outline of peeling paint revealed the name, Harvin, barely visible on the doorframe. Daniel approached cautiously, each step stirring twigs and dry leaves. The door creaked open with a reluctant groan, revealing a dark interior layered with dust and cobwebs. Sunlight filtered in through gaps in the walls, casting eerie beams across forgotten furniture and scattered debris. The air inside was cold and stale, like a tomb sealed away from the world. His flashlight cut through the gloom as he stepped inside, revealing faded photographs pinned to a wooden board. Faces blurred by time, but unmistakably familiar. One photo showed a young boy with unruly hair and bright eyes, a boy who looked just like Liam. Another showed Mira, smiling faintly, standing beside the same cabin years ago. Daniel's breath hitched. How long had Mira been here? What had she found? Moving deeper into the cabin, Daniel spotted a small desk cluttered with notebooks, scraps of paper, and an old, rusted key lying on top of a weathered journal. He picked up the journal, the cover cracked and brittle, and began to read. The pages told a story of desperation. Myra's efforts to keep Liam hidden from Harvin, her fear of being discovered, and cryptic notes about secret compartments and hidden doors. One entry caught his eye. If Harvin comes, I will hide Liam in the crawl space beneath the floorboards. The key is hidden under the loose floorboard near the hearth. No one must ever find him. Daniel's hands trembled as he dropped the journal and dropped to his knees, searching for the loose floorboard Mira mentioned. His fingers traced the dusty floor until they found a slight gap. With a grunt, he pried it open, revealing a small, dark crawl space. Inside, wrapped in a faded blanket, was an old wooden box sealed tightly. His heart pounded as he lifted the box and opened it. Inside were more photographs, candid shots of Liam growing up in secret, playing by the stream, hiding behind trees, and smiling shyly at Mira. Alongside the photos were letters, some addressed to Liam, others from Mira, all filled with love, fear, and hope. Suddenly, a noise behind him made Daniel whirl around, a shadow moving quickly past the window. His breath caught, instincts flaring. Was Harvin still watching? Had he followed him here? Daniel grabbed his phone and called Detective Grayson, his voice low but urgent. I've found the cabin. There's a crawl space with a box of pictures and letters. Someone's been protecting Liam all along, but I think Harvin might still be nearby. Stay put. Grayson's voice came through, steady but tense. Backup is on the way. Don't do anything reckless. Daniel nodded, though no one could see him. The forest around the cabin was silent again, but he knew the past was alive in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal its darkest secrets. As he waited, Daniel held the photographs close, feeling closer to Liam than he had in years. The pieces were coming together. The mystery was unraveling, and soon, the truth would no longer be buried in silence. The minutes stretched like hours as Daniel sat on the creaking floor of the cabin, clutching the old wooden box close to his chest. The forest outside seemed to hold its breath, every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs echoing like footsteps in his ears. His phone buzzed softly. Backup was on its way, but he knew he couldn't just sit and wait. There was more to discover here. Something Myra's notes hinted at, something hidden beneath the surface. The journal had mentioned a secret door concealed behind the cabin's old stone fireplace. Daniel stood, heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination, and approached the hearth. The stones were cold and rough under his fingertips, and after a moment's inspection, he noticed an irregular stone near the base that seemed loose. His breath hitched as he pried it free, revealing a rusty iron ring beneath. With a grunt, he pulled the ring, and to his astonishment, a section of the wall shifted open, revealing a narrow passage cloaked in darkness. His flashlight barely pierced the gloom, but Daniel could see a set of creaking wooden steps leading down. He swallowed hard, knowing this was what Mira had tried to hide, the place where Liam had been kept safe. Descending carefully, he entered a small, windowless room. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old wood. On the far wall hung a series of photographs taped haphazardly, more images of Liam, some recent, others from years past. Next to them was a collection of scribbled notes, desperate messages from Mira, warning a man who had been watching them, detailing every suspicious movement and moment of fear. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Mira had hidden here for years, protecting Liam from Harvin, but it seemed the threat had never fully left them. As he scanned the room, he spotted a worn blanket folded in the corner, and beside it, a small box filled with childhood mementos, Liam's favorite toy car, a small hand-knit scarf, and a diary. He picked up the diary with trembling hands and opened it, reading Liam's neat handwriting. "I am scared, but I know Daddy will find me. I am safe here because Mommy said I must be strong." The words struck Daniel like a thunderclap. His son had lived here, hidden away from the world, carrying hope and fear all at once. Suddenly, a noise upstairs made Daniel freeze. Footsteps, deliberate and slow. Someone was in the cabin. His breath caught, heart hammering. Was it Harvin? Or someone else? He reached for his phone, but the signal was weak down here. Instead, he quietly grabbed a broken piece of wood from the floor and crept toward the stairs. As he ascended, the footsteps grew louder, echoing through the hollow cabin. Emerging into the main room, Daniel saw a figure silhouetted by the dim light of the doorway. A man, tall and thin, with a scarred face partially hidden by a hood. The man's eyes locked on Daniel, and a cold smile spread across his lips. "So you finally found me," the man said, voice low and menacing. "I wonder when you come looking." Daniel's grip tightened on the wood, anger and fear coursing through him. "You have no idea what you've done. You took my son." The man chuckled darkly. "I didn't take him. I saved him. He belongs with me now." Daniel shook his head, disbelief and rage battling inside. "Lies. Liam is my son, and I'm taking him home." The confrontation was electric, charged with years of pain and desperation. Daniel knew this moment would decide everything. His son's fate, the truth buried deep in these woods, and the chance for a family torn apart to be whole again. As the man stepped forward, Daniel braced himself, ready to fight for Liam's future. The cabin seemed to hold its breath as Daniel faced the man standing before him. A shadow from the past, a dark figure who held the answers to years of torment and mystery. The man's eyes gleamed with a mix of challenge and twisted satisfaction, his scarred face a mask of cruelty. Daniel gripped the broken piece of wood tightly, muscles coiling, ready for whatever might come next. "You don't understand," the man said, voice cold and steady, stepping closer. "Liam is not just your son. He's the key to something much bigger. Harvin wanted to erase him from this world, but I protected him, raised him. He's part of my family now." Daniel's heart twisted. The word family sounded like poison on the man's lips. "You kidnapped my boy," Daniel growled, stepping forward. "You stole years of his life and mine. I'm taking him back." The man laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the cabin walls. "Try then. See what you're really dealing with." Before Daniel could react, the man lunged, swift and aggressive. Daniel raised the wood and met the blow with a grunt, feeling the impact ripple through his arms. The fight was brutal but brief, fueled by raw desperation and years of pent-up anger. They struggled, each trying to gain control, the dim cabin turning into a battleground where past wounds and present hopes collided. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't lose this fight. Liam's life, their future, depended on it. With a surge of strength, Daniel shoved the man back and shouted, "You're going to tell me everything. Where is Liam?" The man sneered but then hesitated, his eyes flickering with something unspoken. "He's close, but you're not ready to see what he's become." Daniel's breath caught. What did that mean? What had Liam endured in these years of silence and hiding? Suddenly, footsteps echoed outside. The distant sound of sirens cut through the tension. Backup had arrived. The man's expression shifted. "This isn't over," he warned, stepping back toward the shadows. "You may have found a box, but some secrets are buried for a reason." Before Daniel could react, the man slipped out through a side door, disappearing into the forest's dark embrace. Daniel's pulse pounded as he listened to the fading footsteps, the weight of uncertainty settling heavily on his shoulders. Sirens grew louder, and soon Detective Grayson and officers flooded into the cabin, their faces a mixture of relief and urgency. "We got your call," Grayson said, nodding at Daniel. "Looks like you're closer to the truth than you realize." Daniel held up the box and the diary. "I need to find Liam. Now." Grayson's eyes hardened with determination. "We will. And this time, no one's going to get away." As the officers secured the cabin, Daniel stood by the hidden room's entrance, heart pounding, hope and fear tangled in his chest. The journey to find Liam was far from over, but now the pieces were falling into place. And soon, the father and son who had been torn apart by time and secrets might finally be reunited. The night had fallen heavily over Black Hollow Forest as Detective Grayson and his team set up a command post near the old cabin. Daniel sat by the flickering light of a portable lantern. The worn photographs and letters spread out before him like fragile pieces of a puzzle that had long haunted his soul. Every image, every word, was a tether pulling him closer to Liam, his lost son. Grayson approached, holding a folder thick with newly uncovered documents. "We found something," he said quietly, sliding the papers across the table. "An old property deed linked to the Harvin family. But there's more. A series of phone records, payments, and some strange transactions dating back almost a decade." Daniel's eyes scanned the files, stopping at a name that sent a shiver down his spine. Marcus Thorne. The same man who had confronted him in the cabin. The man who claimed Liam was part of his family. Grayson nodded. "Marcus Thorne is the key. We tracked his movements. He's been living off the grid, but there's one place he frequents, a rundown safe house on the edge of town. We believe Liam might be there." Daniel's heart hammered. The thought of finally seeing Liam again brought tears to his eyes. But there was no time to lose. The team moved swiftly under the cover of darkness, following Grayson's lead toward the dilapidated building. As they approached, Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The safe house was worse than he imagined. Boarded windows, a sagging porch, an eerie silence that swallowed every sound. Grayson signaled the team, and with practiced precision, they moved in. The door creaked open, revealing a dim interior filled with dust and stale air. Daniel's eyes adjusted to the gloom, searching desperately for any sign of his son. In a corner, illuminated by a sliver of moonlight, sat a boy. His hair was longer than Daniel remembered, and dirt smudged his cheeks. But those eyes, bright, wary, and unmistakably Liam's, locked onto Daniel's, filling the room with a powerful, silent connection. "Liam," Daniel whispered, voice trembling with a mix of joy and disbelief. The boy rose slowly, stepping toward him, uncertainty mingling with hope. "Dad!" Daniel dropped to his knees, pulling Liam into an embrace that felt like the world righting itself. Years of pain, loss, and unanswered questions melted away in that moment, replaced by a fragile but fierce bond that neither time nor distance could break. As officers secured the perimeter, Daniel looked into Liam's eyes and promised, "I'm here now, and I'm never leaving." Outside, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, bathing the world in light and new beginnings. The journey had been long and painful, but the hardest part was over. Together, father and son would begin to heal, uncovering the truth behind the shadows that had kept them apart, and forging a future built on love, trust, and hope. The sun was rising as Daniel held Liam close, his heart swelling with relief and hope. Yet beneath the warmth of reunion lay a fragile tension. Years had passed, lives had changed, and the road to healing would be long and uncertain. Liam's eyes, though bright, held shadows of fear and confusion. He was no longer the carefree boy Daniel remembered, but a young soul hardened by secrets and isolation. Over the next days, Daniel dedicated himself to reconnecting with his son. They spent hours talking, Liam cautious, Daniel patient, piecing together fragments of their lost time. Liam spoke of the safe house, the man named Marcus Thorne who raised him under a veil of control and fear, and the mysterious threats that haunted his childhood. He said, "I belonged to him," Liam whispered one evening, eyes downcast, "that I had to obey to stay safe." Daniel's fists clenched at the injustice, yet he knew pushing too hard would only push Liam away. Instead, he offered steady reassurance. "You belong to me, Liam. Always. No one has the right to take that away." Gradually, the walls Liam had built began to crumble. Small moments of laughter returned, shared memories surfaced, and trust, like a delicate flower, started to bloom again. Daniel introduced Liam to the neighborhood, to old friends who had never stopped hoping for his return, and to the life that had waited patiently for him. But amid the healing, the dark past loomed. Investigations into Marcus Thorne revealed a tangled web of criminal dealings, illegal adoptions, human trafficking, and a network that preyed on vulnerable families. Harvin, the name Liam once feared, was part of a deeper conspiracy, one Daniel had barely glimpsed. Determined to protect Liam and bring justice, Daniel teamed up with Detective Grayson and a dedicated task force. Together, they unraveled the sinister connections that had stolen so many childhoods, shining a light on the shadows that had lingered too long. One quiet night, as Liam rested peacefully for the first time in years, Daniel sat by his bedside, fingers tracing the outline of the old photo he had found so long ago. A promise echoed in his mind, to guard his son's future, to heal their broken past, and to ensure no child would suffer as Liam had. The journey was far from over, but with Liam by his side, Daniel felt a fierce hope burning brighter than ever. They were family again, stronger and united, ready to face whatever storms lay ahead. Months had passed since Liam's return, and life was slowly settling into a new rhythm, one filled with healing, hope, and the promise of fresh starts. The scars of the past still lingered, but Daniel and Liam faced each day with courage, building a bond stronger than the years that had tried to tear them apart. Their home, once silent and heavy with loss, now echoed with laughter and quiet conversations. Liam, no longer a scared boy hiding in shadows, blossomed under his father's unwavering love. He returned to school, made new friends, and began to reclaim the childhood stolen from him. Daniel watched with pride and relief, grateful for every small victory. The community that had mourned Liam's disappearance embraced him warmly, their support a reminder that no one is truly alone. Local neighbors, who had kept vigil for years, joined Daniel in celebrating Liam's return, their smiles reflecting the shared joy of a long-awaited miracle. Meanwhile, justice took its course. Marcus Thorne and the criminals involved in the network that had ensnared Liam were arrested and faced trial. The truth about Harvin's sinister role was revealed, exposing the darkness that had overshadowed the neighborhood for too long. It was a painful reckoning, but one necessary to ensure safety and peace for future generations. One autumn afternoon, Daniel and Liam visited the spot where the old box had been buried, the catalyst that had unlocked a chain of events changing their lives forever. Together, they planted a small tree there, a living symbol of growth and renewal. As leaves danced in the breeze, Daniel knelt beside Liam and whispered, "This is our beginning." Liam smiled, eyes bright with promise. "We're together now, Dad. Nothing can take that away." In that moment, surrounded by the whispers of the forest and the warmth of family, Daniel knew the hardest chapter was behind them. The future stretched wide and inviting, filled with love, trust, and the freedom to dream again. Their story, marked by loss and courage, became one of hope and resilience. And as they walked home hand in hand, the past finally resting quietly beneath the earth, Daniel and Liam stepped forward into a life rebuilt and a bond unbreakable. Thank you so much for joining me on this emotional journey of a father's unwavering love and the incredible power of hope and resilience. Daniel and Liam's story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, the light of family and faith can guide us back home. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like and share it. Your support means the world. And if you want to hear more compelling stories like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'd also love to hear your thoughts and feelings. Please leave a comment below and let me know what you think. Until next time, stay hopeful and keep believing in the power of love.